Kalen dropped his iron spade into the dry dirt, staring at his neighbor's glistening, newly painted water wagon with a clenched jaw. The sun burned hot against the back of his neck, the smell of dust and sweat thick in the air. But inside his chest, a cold, bitter hollow widened as he looked down at his own cracked wooden buckets. His farm on the ridge yielded steady wheat and sturdy olives. Yet every dusk, as the laughter from the village square drifted up the hill, Kalen sat alone on his stone porch, chewing dry bread that tasted like ash in his mouth. That evening, he barged into the local carpenter's shop, demanding a mahogany card he couldn't afford, desperate to outshine his cousin's fortune, only to hurl his remaining copper coins onto the workbench when the artisan shook his head. Returning home in the dark, he kicked over his own grain sacks, ruining half the morning's harvest in a blind fit of envy. You are trampling gold while screaming that you only have dirt. A raspy voice cut through the stillness. Eldora stood by his gate, her hands resting on a knotty cedar walking stick, the faint scent of crushed sage hovering around her woven cloak. Her pale eyes caught the moonlight, tracking the nervous twitch in Kalen's thumb as he gripped his ruined wheat. Kalen spat into the dust, demanding why a penniless old woman felt entitled to critique his life. But Eldora stepped closer, her sandals crunching softly on the gravel. "Look at your hands," she whispered, pointing her stick at his trembling fingers. "You buy tools you cannot use. You ruin food you work to grow, all because your gaze is pinned on another man's yard. If you keep bleeding your soul to match your neighbor's shadow, you will lose this entire farm before the moon completes its cycle." Kalen froze, the chill of the night air sinking through his damp shirt as her words struck the exact raw nerve he had tried to bury. Eldora did not offer soft comfort. Instead, she pulled a small, rough clay vessel from her satchel, filled it with water from Kalen's well, and placed it firmly into his calloused palms. She leaned in, her voice low and sharp as a honed blade, telling him that rejecting the poison of comparison required a daily shift of the mind, a disciplined practice of seeing what he held, imagining its total loss until his chest ached, and then opening his eyes to claim its return. As the first light of dawn began to bleed across the horizon, painting the olive trees in deep amber, Eldora turned toward the road, leaving Kalen standing cold and breathless with the clay bowl, knowing that his very next breath would force him to choose between his consuming envy and the untried habit that could save his life. Kalen clutched the cool clay bowl against his chest, watching the amber sunrise bleed into an unnatural violet sky as a low rumble vibrated through the earth under his boots. The smell of sulfur and wet zinc filled the damp air, and within seconds, a daggered bolt of lightning shattered the silence, striking the center of his grove with a deafening crack that threw sparks into the dry grass. A 30-foot flame roared to life, devouring his oldest olive trees, the bitter smoke stinging his eyes and scorching his throat as he dragged heavy buckets of water from the well, splashing the embers until his arms shook with fatigue. By mid-morning, half his orchard lay transformed into blackened char, the heat radiating off the ruined soil while his neighbor rode past on a fat mule, shouting over the fence about his own pristine, untouched harvest. Kalen's jaw tightened, the familiar sour knot of envy rising in his chest, making him want to smash his remaining wooden buckets against the stones and curse the sky. But before he could surrender to the urge, Eldora emerged from the drifting smoke, her cedar stick tapping firmly against the charred trunk of a fallen tree. She pointed a gnarled finger at his white knuckles, asking him if he was going to burn down the rest of his soul because his neighbor's trees still stood green. Kalen glared through the haze, shouting that he had lost half his life's work while others suffered nothing. But Eldora stepped into the heat, snatching the clay bowl from his hands and dipping it into the scorched well water. She commanded him to close his eyes right there on the smoldering ash, to picture the remaining well dry. The roof of his house caved in, and his body crippled beyond the ability to work. Kalen shut his eyes tightly, the heat of the dying fires baking his skin as he forced his breath into 3 slow, deliberate counts, imagining the total darkness of having nothing left to salvage. When he opened his eyes, the cool water in the clay bowl caught the sunlight, and the green leaves of his surviving trees rustled softly in the morning breeze. A strange, sharp clarity cut through his rage. He grabbed his iron axe, turned his back on his neighbor's distant laughter, and began methodically chopping away the blackened limbs, clearing the ground to save the living roots. By sunset, as the ash settled over his bruised shoulders, Eldora stood at the edge of his fence, her eyes reflecting the quiet shift in his posture as he set down his tool. Before he could speak, a wealthy merchant's carriage rattled down the dirt road, stopping near his gate with a flash of silk robes and gold coins, presenting Kalen with an ultimatum that threatened to test his newly reclaimed peace to its absolute limit. The merchant stepped from his lacquered carriage, the heavy scent of jasmine perfume mixing with the iron smell of soot, and tossed a heavy leather pouch of gold onto Kalen's wooden bench, offering to buy the scorched land for a fraction of its worth while mocking his broken farm. Kalen reached toward the glinting coins, the cold knot of inferiority tightening in his chest as he envisioned the merchant's grand estate. But Eldora stepped between them, her cedar stick striking the dirt with a hollow thud. She caught Kalen's wrist, her thumb pressing hard against his racing pulse, reminding him that trading his anchor for another man's silver would only leave his heart starving in a golden cage. Kalen drew a sharp breath, closing his eyes amidst the swirling dust. He pictured his life without the land, wandering endless highways with a heavy sack of gold and a hollow soul. Taking 3 slow, grounded breaths until the phantom loss gave way to deep presence, he opened his eyes, pushed the velvet pouch back into the merchant's hands with a firm, steady motion, and ordered him off his road, choosing the dirt under his feet over borrowed luxury. Years bled into decades, the scorched orchard growing back thick and golden under Kalen's daily care. His small stone house filling with the warm smell of baking bread and the light footsteps of his grandchildren. Sitting beneath the massive olive tree that had once survived the lightning strike, his silver hair catching the amber dusk, Kalen set the old clay bowl on the table beside Eldora, who rested quietly in the shade with a soft, knowing smile. He watched a young traveler trudge up the ridge, eyes fixed bitterly on the prosperous farms below, and Kalen stood up, extended the clay bowl filled with cool well water, and offered to teach him the single daily habit that could shatter the prison of comparison forever.